Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another one of our talks on a Saturday morning. My name is Glaucio Pessoa, talking to you here from Atlanta, Georgia. Today, we have a very interesting topic to talk to you. And as always, feel free to post your comments or questions and make our conversation as interactive as possible. Today, we have our friend and collaborator with the U.S. Spiritist Federation, MARCIA TRAJANO. Hi, Marcia. How are you?
Good.
It's awesome to have you here this morning and talking to us about such an interesting topic. So I understand that several people already know you since you've done these talks before and you presented before, but I'm just gonna I have a quick bio about you here. So you are one of the founders of the Christian Spiritist community of Atlanta, and you're a former board member of the U.S. Spiritist Federation. And you give talks and lead study groups in English and Portuguese. Academically, you have a master's degree in management and technology, and you have the project management professional certification. And currently, you work in the project management field. Again, thank you so very much for being here with us. And again, the topic is quite interesting. It is understanding the power of compassion. So very important topic, especially for us after being over a year during this period. A troublesome period for most of us, but especially a period of reflection. So this is a very interesting topic. Marcia, let's kick off with our initial prayer, and then after that, you have the floor. Thank you, Lord, for the opportunity for us to be here and have a conversation about something as important as in our lives as the power of compassion. May we keep an open mind, and especially an open heart, for the teachings that we will receive this morning. It is great for us to study so many things and learn so many things from our Spiritist doctrine, but the most important thing is how we apply our knowledge in our decisions, in our lives, and especially during our moments of trouble. Inspire our lecture for this morning, and may we have a lecture conducted in lots of peace, and may we be ready to absorb all the learnings. So be it. Marcia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everyone. It is so good to be here, and I want to say good morning for all of you. And I just wanted to come here today and ask, shall we talk a little bit about compassion? Most importantly, shall we talk about understanding the power of compassion? And as I say that, how do we even start? Well, we start understanding that leaders of great religions of the world, they all talk about the fact that compassion and the golden rule are fundamental principles, and that they are both integral to their faiths. So I would like to call out a very respected religious historian. Her name is Karen Armstrong. And she has dedicated her entire career to the study of compassion, and she really pushes the idea that We must develop compassion, and the development of compassion specifically is at the core of any religious practice. She refers that to, oh, Judaism, she refers to Christianity, Islamic or Buddhism, as well as any of the traditional literature, including, for example, Homer's Iliad. So all of that, she brings out the idea of compassion. So we start here with us as, my apologies. She starts here with the idea that for Christianity, our reference is really Christ, Jesus, and the fact that that golden rule, the reference to the golden rule, can be found in both Matthew 7:12 and Luke 6:31. And Luke, as you can see there, speaks that simply put, you must do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Matthew, in his words, explains in a little differently that in everything, in all things, whatsoever you would do, that men should do to you, do even so to them. And he refers to Jesus saying, this is the law and this is the prophets. We can even bring the idea of the golden rule, the findings way before Jesus and Christianity. For example, Confucius, we start to talk about the 5th century BC, right? Or the philosopher, for example, Epicurus in the 4th century BC. And they all talk about the idea that you don't want something that would harm the other to you, would you? So do to them as you wish to do to the other. So that's the golden rule. It is your feelings, it is yourself. And Karen Armstrong, as I make a reference to her in her teachings, she says that in fact, that golden rule, as it translates compassion, transcends any religion. And she talks about the notion that that is really important for us to overcome, or in her words, sidestep our own ego. So according to Karen, it is our ego that actually keeps us away from what is best in us, the essence of who we are. So to develop compassion, it means that we have to understand that the other is deserving of our feeling, our empathy. And she also says, or it's implicit in her teachings, that compassion is not something that is actually innate to us, right? She claims that empathy and compassion must be exercised all the time. And the emphasis here is exercise. So if we start studying the topic of compassion, you cannot go anywhere without stumbling upon the Dalai Lama. And the Dalai Lama, in a loving way, says that the notion of exercise is very true. Not only we should exercise, but he uses a word that I like a lot. He used the word to cultivate, right? He says, we must, all of us, bring about the idea of cultivating values. And he goes on to talk a lot, and I'm not going to spend time here talking about, but he goes on to talk a lot about the fact that in our education system, what we mean by our Western education system, there's a lot left, because education systems is really all about your intellectual exercise, and those cultural, moral exercises are only picked up by religious institutions. So good that compassion is at the core of most religions, but that brings us a question of, well, what if I, as a family member, do not prefer to be religious. What is that gap? Well, let's talk a little bit about it. Because as we hear Karen Armstrong, Dalai Lama, I have to pause and ask, is compassion taught, or is compassion something that is innate in us? What do you think? Well, I contend in this argument that compassion is actually innate in all of us, that love, that empathy, that compassion has existed in all of us even before we were here on earth as Homo sapiens. So I ask you to the next 20, 30 minutes or so to explore with me this notion of, is it foreign? Is it taught? Or is it innate in us? And if it's innate in us, how can we really understand, observe, and have evidence of that? So there are three levels of compassion that we can actually bring as evidence. Number one is kin selection. Number two, reciprocal altruism. And number three, universal compassion. What is kin selection, and what we can talk about as this evidence of this argument? Well, kin selection, simply put, is the natural occurring phenomenon within a member of a family. Animals, right, there are some exceptions, but animals in large take care of their relatives. I always come to my mind the notion of a ferocious lioness, right, hunting and doing so much what it looks to us cruelty for their survival, yet spends all the time in their family taking care of its own. So if we think about it, we can actually start expanding our argument to saying that kin selection tells us that the compassion is a genetic predisposition to help your own kind. It's almost like it's my DNA, it's in my DNA to be able to protect my own so that we can survive. And I can go back all the way to Darwin, right? In a very Darwinian rationale, compassion, self-serving at the genetic level. So conclusion in this argument, good news, compassion is a natural trait. Well, let's go on to reciprocal altruism. And you can read a lot about it when we first start reading, for example, Joanna DeAngelis in her book, The Psychology of Gratitude, where she speaks about what we can talk here as scientifically referred to as reciprocal altruism. Joanna talks about this recognition of I do something, I get something back. So compassion at that level is when I do something good for those who either will return to me a favor, a protection, or whatever. It is also about my clan, my group, those that recognize that I have a commitment and a responsibility. So not very inspiring, right? But from a biological point of view, it is actually still self-serving, right? I limit, as I said before, to my friends, or in larger scale, to my allies, to my nation, to my sports club, whatever that sense of community is my reciprocal altruism. I help those that belong in this bubble, if you will. And I ask at this point, to me, to you, when someone close to you has something horrible happened to them, and we can just close our eyes and think about, oh, it's a fire and that burned that person's house, or something happened to their cat, or they had an accident, or whatever may external or internal happen to that person. How do you feel? Worse off, how do you act? Right? We are compelled by the sense of reciprocal altruism to do something to that person. How do I feel when I hear about a terrible thing that happened to somebody across the globe that I have no sense of connection? It's very different. You don't come to that sense of empathy or compassion at that point. Well, as a conclusion in this argument, yeah, beyond animals, because of reciprocal altruism, compassion is found in human nature, and it is actually extending beyond your family. Now we start talking about your friends. You talk about your community, if you will. So while it does not imply with reciprocal altruism that compassion as a universal concept belongs as innate in humankind, right? We start to feel an expansion of that, protecting my clan, protecting my family only. If you go back to Darwin, in his point of views, right, we would probably think in terms of reciprocal altruism is something, actually found intuitively, and we can argue genetically even, in all societies, right? Even those, remember we talked about Karen Armstrong when she said, and Dalai Lama that said that it's part of religion. Well, that sense of reciprocal altruism is found even those societies not exposed to a religion or even an ethical philosophy. So when we speak about survival, we also speak about the inherent need for helping each other. Therefore, the argument still proves right. But then we go into this universal compassion. That is the question. Are we born with a built-in capacity for universal compassion? What do you think? Although that appreciation of the golden rule is very natural to all of us, when we start to talk about universal conception, we come to the idea that in our minds we often and I use the term carve out, right? We carve out, we take away, we allow exceptions to that rule in our own lives. So let's go in using cliches because those are good examples. What are some of the questions that may pop in your mind? Because the ones that come to my mind are, who here would like to go to prison? I wouldn't, right? And I have a feeling that none of us here would actually say, yeah, I would like to go to prison. Yet, if we think about it in this concept, and I'm talking about generalized concept of universal compassion, if I don't want to go to prison, why is it widely accepted belief that there are some people not only should go to prison, that you personally would like to remove from society and put them into that prison? Why do we think we can treat them differently than what we'd like to be treated? Well, if we start to argue like that, and we start to think about those people, they're going to prison, they must have done a bad thing, and because they've done a bad thing, it makes it right, it makes it just. We're talking now about justice. It makes it just for them to go to prison and not me. So the question that, another question that pops into my mind is, can that golden rule be applied, truly applied in a universal fashion? Because unfortunately, we, all of us, have this enormous capacity to carve out exceptions. We have this enormous capacity to put people in those special buckets, in those categories. And then we have to think, well, Marcia, our ability to categorize, to label people, to move them, box them, if you will, does it invalidate the notion of universal compassion? Well, in the case of sending people to prison, it's easy to say, well, we have a human judicial system that is impartial, and they determine, right, who gets excluded from the golden rule. But what about our everyday life? How do we make decisions of it is just, it is right to categorize people, remove them, to make an exception and allow them to not have the compassion that I project to those who are my friends and those who I feel deem my support, my empathy, my compassion? Well, I come here with some of the exceptions because I would love to know if we have a formula to determine that, right? Like the impartial judicial system has a formula, has a system that has been in place for centuries now. But what about us? What can help us dictate that sense of impartiality? And some of the things, this is classic, it comes to us, right? Well, if you are my enemy, I don't have compassion for you. If you are my rival or my competitor, right? Somebody who is competing to get something, and that can be in your day-to-day life, in your job that you're applying, and your next door neighbor is applying for the same job, and it doesn't matter that the person needs the job more than you. You're there to protect yourself, right? That's your compass. What about if, as I mentioned before, if you just don't belong? You are the other. There are so many examples, too many actually for me to cite from exceptions from our lives, right? And so I come to this argument, and I come to the thought that it's not that we don't have compassion and that is innate in our lives. The problem are those exclusions that we allow ourselves to exclude the enemy, the rival, the other. And we now come to maybe a conclusion that the golden rule is something somehow built in us, but it may not necessarily trigger this kind of universal love that universal compassion implies. And without it, the world will not be transformed. Enter game theory. Oh, what am I talking about? Why are we talking about political, economic references to game theory? Well, let's talk a little bit about it because it helps us understand. Game theory teaches about two types of games: the zero-sum or non-zero sum. Somebody reminded me earlier today that we have an Olympics going on, and the Olympics is definitely, as we can see many sports, a zero-sum game, right? There is a winner, there is a loser. If you put a -1 +1, it's a zero-sum game. And non-zero-sum game, you may see that actually in economies, right? Where you can do win-win versus if we lose, all lose, if we win, all win. A good example that comes to my mind are maybe if I produce something, agriculture, and I have the company that transports and the company that sells and the person that buys, we're all in the win continuum. But if we don't, everybody loses, right? Or in a more confrontational aspect, even war allies, right? If my coalition, if you will, of allies during World War II, I'm just coming to that example. If one loses, everybody loses, but if we win, all wins, right? So if we think historically, and we think about this web of non-zero sumness, made up this word, I believe, and we can start to think about maybe those can be considered a channel for that universal compassion we're talking about. If we think about it, from the Stone Age to today, right? From the technological evolutions, wheel, the roads, writing, all the communication technology is building in one over the other and making it possible for us to become the social, global social organization we are today, right? Our society has grown from that hunter-gatherer to what we can call a flat empire, right? We are no longer a hunter-gatherer village per se. We're now a global village. And the story of globalization is a beautiful story of that non-zero sumness. Yeah, our interdependence is making us aware of a collective system that we are all part of. So if there is a local economic crash, it ripples into everybody else. An unknown new virus has become a global pandemic. So the question here, if we look into those challenges, those great challenges, those global challenges, do you believe that they are actually expanding our notion of compassion? Close our eyes and let's think about it. How do you feel toward your villain? How do you feel today, for example, when you think about, and I'm going to put air quotes, right? The villains of, let's say, past century, World War II, from the Ally perspective, do we consider Japan, Germany, whatever, as your enemy? Or do you have deep admiration for the people, for the culture, for the country? What about this past year and a half? Is the world traveler that spread this unknown virus your villain? I don't believe so. I do believe that this interdependent world that we live is pushing us, is forcing us to acknowledge through pain, through loss, right, to the needed, the forced compassion that we have to see the humanity in the other. So back to game theory. With all the non-zero sum relationships that we can see, it's really quite abundant in our society if we start thinking about it, right? Why has the world, if you think about it as well, become a world that is not yet filled with love, peace, understanding? Why it actually feels we're going backwards? Could we say now that maybe we need to move beyond the need to cooperate, reciprocal altruism, to the true, genuine altruism innate in all of us. Can we do this? Can we perhaps expand our moral imagination, our sense of empathy, especially for those that is oh so easy to be labeled as our enemy? So, cliche, really cliche. Let's think about. I can think in the 70s, right? We're here in this country, and I see somebody burning our country's flag, or we see somebody hurting an animal. Another cliche, terrible image, by the way. Someone harming the environment. What are the feelings that we have when we see those people, when we witness them do things that are not something acceptable to you? Could
There seems to be a little technical difficulty, so please bear with us. Very interesting conversation, makes us reflect and reflect about who in our, who's our neighbor actually. And Marcia made a very interesting point about the whole concept of globalization, when we no longer see other countries from, as you mentioned, from a zero-sum perspective, but how different countries can grow together. There have been several articles and conversations about the whole pandemic and how the pandemic actually made us reflect. And interesting how we, a lot of times we would associate a pandemic with a developing nation, but now we see a situation that involves all of us, affects every aspect of everyone's life. So it is harsh. I'm not making little of it. However, the opportunities for reflection are immense. Sometimes something as tragic as a pandemic opens our eyes to see the world as actually something larger than just our neighborhood, just our country, for instance. So very interesting aspect. I'm not so sure if everybody remembers the tsunami that happened about 16 years ago, and we always had this concept that, again, that a tsunami would be something, an event that would affect only, again, developing nations, impoverished locations. But an interesting aspect of that particular tsunami was that people from all over the world, they got affected. People from all over the world, there were on the list of those who perished, people from all over the world. So a lot of times, those situations, they open our minds to create this empathy for us to understand that the other may not. And just to let everybody know, Marcia is working on a techno issue. She will be with us very soon. So her camera is, she's saying her camera's out, but she will be with us. So again, even something as tragic as that can open our minds. Hey, Marcia, are you back with us?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you quite well.
Okay, my camera is not working, so let's try. If I may just use the slide and we can go from there. My apologies, everyone. I don't know what is wrong, but let me try to go back because I don't know when I stopped. We're still discussing or finalizing the idea of a zero-sum game. All right?
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Marcia.
Thank you, Glaucio. My apologies, everyone. So, anyways, I think I was talking about the image of someone hurting an animal, right? And I was really trying to see if we can start connecting to our feelings, right? Because it's not easy, right? Unless we somehow are able to truly connect to that person and understand what has triggered that type of action. And I like it because I would like for us to think in terms of the exercise to expand our moral imagination, especially to a place that is not so natural, right? Especially when it's not easy, or especially when it's easy to have those exceptions. So tell me if you can see my other slide.
Yes, I can see it. Mm-hmm.
Awesome, thank you. So, so I'm here to talk about compassion in God, and I would like to say, and this is attributed to Albert Einstein, but we don't have complete evidence of where it comes from. But anyways, Einstein attributedly said that God did not create evil, just as darkness is the absence of light, evil is the absence of God. So when we start to think about it, religion and how religion connects us to God can indeed harness our emotional center and invite all of us to do this exercise together. We can, through religion, expand our moral imagination. What am I talking about? What are you saying? Well, I'm saying, remember, right? And I'm going to read this to you guys because it's another Einstein quote that really helps us understand. And this one was actually attributed to New York Times article attributed to Einstein. This was a 1972 article from New York Times that is really interesting, where Einstein says the following: a human being is a part of the whole called by us universe. A part limited in time and space. You got to love the man. Einstein calls he collective, us, right? He experiences himself, his thoughts, his feelings as something separated from the rest. It is a kind of optical delusion. He doesn't say optical illusion. He says a kind of optical delusion of his own consciousness, that sense of separation. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us to our own personal desires and to affection for a few persons only closest to us. So Einstein actually tells us that our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our circle of compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole nature in its business. How about that? Compassion, this is all Einstein, folks. Compassion is defined as the sensitivity to another's suffering and the corresponding will to free the other from that suffering. So now we start talking about compassion, God, emotions, sensitivity to the other and to the other's suffering, and the desire within us to free that person who is in pain from what is causing that source. What is the cause of the source of suffering? What is causing that suffering? And he even tells us that love is defined by the will for the other to be happy. So if we think about those words by Einstein, thank you, in direct opposition to our ego-driven, self-centered selfishness, compassion is what we call love in action. So I ask all of us to, as we come close to the end of this discussion today, let us be reminded that those of us who are caught in the circle of self-concern are suffering. And we're suffering many times helplessly. Those of us who are able to exercise that innate quality at whatever level of compassion are free, and they are consequently, explicitly happier. I hope you guys follow my rationale, because it's important, and I bring this call to action that did not come from me, but actually from the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama left us this call to action to remember. He said that we, the Western society, do not teach about moral values to include compassion. So he tells us that we must transform the world. And to do that, we must find out a way to have what he calls a planned approach to teaching about compassion. Compassion, according to the Dalai Lama, is quite powerful. It is the tool, the trigger to transform the world we live in, and it must be found everywhere, from kindergarten to college. So, as I say this, I would like to wrap up with some ideas of how can we do this, because I don't know that we can change the curriculum, right? The schools from kindergarten to college, but we have something really cool, which is Spiritism. We, as Spiritists, we have the tools to understand current relationships that we are immersed in, and those difficult, often difficult interrelationships can be seen very easily to Spiritists, because we have the perspective of immortality of the soul, and based on the law of action and reaction, we understand truly there are no victims, there are no perpetrators. We're here to learn, we're here to grow, and most importantly, because of that, it becomes inadmissible to continue to carve exceptions to the golden rule. That's hard, isn't it? But I'd like to propose a few things that we can do that will help us in cultivating compassion. Number one, we can all visualize ourselves, all of us, every single person in this world, as one. That visualization expands from our friends, which is easy. Our friends are those who we care. Those are the ones that we feel responsible and actually even committed to their well-being. But we need to start to visualize and adding to those friends and the loved ones, those that are neutral to us, right? Those that, for whatever reason, I don't have any positive or negative feeling toward. And oh boy, moving on to our enemies. And enemies, simply put, is anyone that you have negative feelings toward. Another point that we can do, this is my call to action with tips. We can visualize the other as your child. As I said, spiritists that we are, it's conceivable, it's even understandable and expected that that is so-called your enemy could have been in a previous life your child or even your mother. Let's think about it. Let's expand our imagination. The third point that I would like to call to action here is for us to really think about gratitude. Let us be grateful. And gratitude can be, and can be seen and read in Joanna DeAngelis' Psychology of Gratitude. She speaks quite lengthily on the idea that at a minimum, gratitude is the awareness of being thankful because we are benefactors, right? We have benefited from some sort of good deed, right, including our lives. So have that awareness in everything that we do. At a minimum, we should be aware and be grateful, and actually have a sense of retribution to those all around us that are kind to us in so many different ways. In that book, Joanna DeAngelis urges us to understand that gratitude is something that we must do and experience in all moments of our existence. I'm almost done, but I'd like to call in my call to action something that I say it is my words, right? Lovely love. What is lovely love? It's understanding, and we can I'm closing my eyes, right? When we were perhaps young adults, and we experienced that lovely love, and it permeates in all of our lives. But we can remember, if like you're far from being a teenager, when you were in love, and how that love, that we call it erotic love, right? How that love was transformative. How lovely love is, how beautiful, how happy, how satisfied we are when we're loved. And that lovely love is extended to a baby, to a child, to an adult, to an animal, to a plant, to the world. So let us nourish, let us find and exercise lovely love to all that are around in our lives. And almost there, because I have to say, let us practice our universal compassion. Let us look deeply, really deeply, at the reality of all the people we can think of, what they're going through. And the final item in my call to action is actually beyond that universal compassion, right? And I say to all of us, look to what is that is linking all of us to the needs of the other. Let's be aware of the pain we suffer. The pain is that link. We can expand our compassion beyond universal compassion, not only to the other, but to ourselves and to the whole of what is humankind. As we recognize pain in us is also the pain in the other. And this recognition comes when we understand the implication that we live in a world of trials and expiations, which simply put, it just means that we're all dealing with a lot of pain. The last point I would say is that sense of universal responsibility, right? We can call that the common religion of humanity can say is kindness, right? And if we say that, what can we do in our commitment to be kind? And if we forget, let us just remember what happens in the other, the trigger. Remember, we talked about to burn a flag, to kick an animal, to do whatever act of violence, of inflicting pain that we do not accept. There's something there that triggers that person that is also triggering me, and we're responding differently. So we are responsible to be kind. We're responsible to do whatever we can at whatever level to address it. And this awareness will lead us to a whole new orientation, a new area of our lives when we'll be able to live equally to ourselves as to the other. At that point, we are able to realize we can only be happy when the other is. My final slide. I lied. So, what are some of the thoughts about compassion that we can leave with, right? Compassion has to do with behaviors, right? And behaviors that lead to helping the other. Compassion is not exclusive to religion. And there's some level of compassion that we say can be found, that is found since we are born. And that actually compassion brings immediate benefits to those who practice it. When we do good, when we help the other, we receive immediate benefits. When compassion truly becomes, in that universal and beyond universal compassion, a part of who we are, we're actually more open. We, in a very base level, we have more friends. We expand our universe and we're more happy. The genuine expression of compassion is actually a form of loving the other. So I close here with saying that Matthew expanded the golden rule, and he said, of course, in Jesus' world, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind, right? And what he's telling us is Jesus is urging us to reflect about how great life is, how love and compassion are essential for us to live well, to live in peace, to live in harmony. So I leave here with the ask for all of us to be aware of what is important to be found in our hearts, independent of our creed, our religion, or philosophical uh, verticals that we follow. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Marcia. That has been a very interesting, very insightful lecture. I love the guidelines, the tips that you provided to us. So a lot of opportunity for us to reflect. And speaking of which, there are lots of questions here for you to answer and for you to provide further clarification on this topic. So the first one, good morning. Freddie Ricardo. Good morning. Can we acquire compassion just by practicing even though we aren't feeling it?
Oh, Freddie, thank you for the question. According to what we read, especially in the books, right? And my source that I'm reading right now voraciously is the Psychology of Gratitude by Joanna DeAngelis, and she talks about it, right? Start by practicing it, even when you cannot feel it, because it is an exercise. And those words by the spirit author Joanna is echoed by those other great and highly respected teachers, such as Karen Armstrong. So yes, absolutely. Let us all try, and at a minimum, let's try to be compassionate to ourselves. Right? We need to look into ourselves and be very compassionate, to be good, to really open our spiritual light into ourselves as well. Thank you for the question.
That was a very interesting question. We got to at least practice it, right, Marcia?
Yes.
Next one. From TVC International Spiritist Council. Can you explain who is the other? Okay, I like this one. I really like this one. Because I wanna hear your insights on who is the other.
Well, this is very interesting, and thank you, TVC, for the question. When we think about the other, and it's a very right, the neighbor, the other, it's a very interesting concept, and there are actually uh, s- uh, researchers on religions, and I'm not going to quote Karen Armstrong. I'm going to quote now Joseph Campbell, right? Who he's great when he explains religions because he looked at religion. Just a plug on Joseph Campbell, right? When most theologians and theological historians looked at religions, they looked at what makes them different. And Joseph Campbell really looked at how similar they are, and he comes across the explanation of Jesus and the sense of the enemy, the other, right? And Jesus, as Joseph pointed to us, was the very first religious figure ever to tell us to love your neighbor. I'm sorry, to love your enemy. And with that, it brings us this question. So, who is your enemy? But most important, who's the other, right? Beyond, before they become the enemy, who's the other? And you have to go into this trip, this journey, if you will, of understanding that in our distant history, right, our survival was really relative to how good you could protect your clan, your family against the other. And the other at the time could be a different tribe, right? It was very important that the other, who's not us, is indeed someone that becomes your enemy. And if we move that all the way, this is, we're talking about, hunter-gatherer society, et cetera, et cetera. But if we come back to today, who is the other for me? Marcia, right? And I can start looking at the other can be who's not in my family. Well, no, no, no. Let's expand that. The other is the person that perhaps cannot speak, in this case, English or my native tongue, Portuguese. The other can be the person that dresses differently than me, that speaks different than me. The other may be the person that has a religion that goes against everything I believe deep inside of me. And so the other can be anything that is outside of who I am and allows, as a consequence, a very easy consequence of that, for us to, as I mentioned before, to carve exceptions in our lack of compassion. So thank you for the question, because I think it's something for all of us to ponder. How can I include more and be aware of every time? And this is the subject of something that is really popular and very present today in companies or in organizations, right? Which is the study of unconscious bias. And whenever we fall into demonstrate, we all have, by the way, our own unconscious bias, is the process of otherness, othering the other, right? Which simply means every time I discount you, every time I dilute you, every time I don't listen to you, every time I don't respect you, you are the other.
It's very interesting, Marcia, because it's kind of like sometimes in a process of dehumanization, right? You authorize the person so you can take some actions, and like you said, some exceptions. That's a
Yes.
Yeah, it's a very interesting topic. We have more questions. So Daniel Santos, if compassion is innate in us, how can you explain people's cruelty behavior and cruelty, and exploited?
Yes, thank you, Daniel. And that's the biggest question, right? And the biggest argument. And it can be explained in the levels of compassion that we can do. So going back to that first question, can we start at the very beginning? Can we be actually compassionate in us to understand at a minimum how compassionate I am, and if I cannot be compassionate to those, because it's not about those who are not compassionate toward us. It's really a question, Daniel, of us being compassionate to that who were cruel. Does this make sense? Right? So how can I embrace those who are yet unable to be really kind, to have that universal compassion, that universal love, that universal ability to feel empathy for something that is not important to us? Thank you. Thank you for the question. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, that's a very interesting topic. I mean, that could be a topic of a whole conversation. So next question here, are compassion, empathy, and altruism the same?
Oh, good word, right? Those are, thank you, U.S. Spiritist Federation. So those are different elements, right? Compassion, empathy, and altruism. And I would not want to define them here because I don't have them as crisp as I should be. But they are related. They're not the same, right? Altruism is just to simply put the ability to help the other, and empathy is all about the feeling of the other, right? So compassion gets both of them because it is love the other, to feel the pain as an empathy, but be there and actively love and do something about it. So compassion brings both of those worlds together in one concept. There's so much we can talk about it, and I would love to, for all of you, to take a moment to really research or ponder or read about the subject, and the fact that without compassion, and in some cases we can say compassion equals charity, right? And charity equals love in action. So those are the types of things that we need to start thinking about it. How kind, how compassion, how do I embrace the other in my world and become a conduit of that universal love, of that universal compassion? Thank you. Thank you so much for the question.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say, Marcia, that those are topics that by themselves, they could be individual lectures, right? They're related, but they're individual aspects. Yasko, hello, Yasko. Great topic, Marcia. I feel that although compassion is innate in humans, to awaken it, we need some emotional, personal connection to the person, the community, the animals struck by pain, suffering. We always ask, who were they? How did it happen? Etc. How to learn to feel compassion without the inquiry.
Oh, that's awesome. Yasko, thank you.
Yes.
And that's exactly the argument, right? What is it? Do we learn how to do this? And can we do this intellectually, as it was put earlier in this discussion by the Dalai Lama, right? Do we teach from kindergarten to college to intellectually have those types of inquiries, which is what triggered the other to behave like something else that I would do. Therefore, without that judgment, how can I be connected? Or in our case, if I am cruel, right? If I am cruel, what do I need to be aware and connect with myself so that I can become kind? But this is a really important topic, Yasko, and I would say the essence of this question is to be aware of that universal link that is in all of us, which is we all suffer We're all in pain, right? And how can we exercise the feelings of compassion by awakening in us the connection, that universal connection to all of us as humans, right? As spirits, immortal spirits living in this mortal experience that is our life, our incarnation, but that it's expected, it's inherent in this experience that we all are still suffering because we live in the world of trials and expiations. We are still, and I don't like to use the word evil, right? There's more evil than good, and I say there's more cause of pain to ourselves and to others than there is more the ability to good to others and to ourselves. And that's a balance. If you were to put a percentage, right, I would say maybe we are at 25%, 50% of that equation, but the ability to still cause pain exists in us. The ability to suffer pain still exists in us very predominantly, and that we need to be compassionate to us as well as the other. Thank you. Great question. Thank you so much,
That was
Justin.
an awesome question. I like the way you put it, Marcia. You know, we live in this world, and this suffering actually connects us, right? It helps us get connected. So I like the way you emphasize that. Bobby O, how can the arts help cultivate compassion? I particularly like this one.
Hey, Bob, thank you. Thank you so much for being here and for asking that question. And this is me thinking, right? We do know that art is really a vehicle for our sensitivity, right, as spirits. And I do believe that the arts, and we're talking about visual art, we talk about music, etc. All of it encompass that sense of the best that is in us, in our evolutionary path. So having that sensitivity that arts will also help us with cultivate that emotional connection to the others. I don't know if I answer your question, Bob, but this is really maybe a trigger for a lot of reflection on that sensitivity to arts, as also awakening the sensitivity to the other, right? The ability to, the will, the desire to promote happiness and a sense of, I guess, equally sensitive to that emotes to us, right? It's an emotional feeling of well-being. I'm not sure if I answered the question, but this is really interesting reflection.
Yeah, I remember. You remember Live Aid from the '80s? You know, when they had these big concerts and everybody together. So it kind of like brings it to mind. You know, all musicians and sensitizing people to take action for a common cause. Bob, oh, another question. Thank you, Bob. Can you make the whole Einstein quote available to us, please?
Yes, yes. So I'm looking for it so I can put and the U.S. Spiritist Federation can make it available. So thank you.
Excellent. Another question. How to have compassion to those who want to hurt us?
Yeah, that's the big issue, right? It's and I think Yasko alluded to that, I believe. It's when we see the cruelty in others, and specifically the cruelty toward us, right? So what is the boundary between being compassionate to those who are exacerbating our pain? And I would say, and this is my own opinion, it is understanding the criticality of what is the hurt, right? What is the hurt? And if you can visualize, right? Let's pretend a young kid who's bullying, right? And it's easy rationally for us to say, I don't want that person close to me, and you may not want that person close to you, but it's important for you to also think in terms of the connection to that who's there hurting us. Is think about it. What is that language of violence, for example, that this kid learned, if that person has lived a life, a childhood of only violence, right? If that's the only thing that has educated, if you will, in this incarnation, that language of violence. So we need to understand akin, and I'm going to give another example, to for example, you finding a dog, right, that has been hurt, a car on a road hurt that dog. The dog is in so much pain, and you're there to rescue this dog in its pain, and you cannot get too close, right? Because the dog, in its pain, it will bark and snarl at you. So you need to approach with care. And maybe you're not equipped to help the dog, just like you're not equipped to allow that person who's hurting your child or yourself, right, to be close to you as of yet. But compassion may be to connect with that person's cruelty regardless, understanding that something is triggering the violence and that cruelty, and that you need to help by either removing yourself, but not judging, and have other type of help as necessary. Does this make sense?
Thank you, Marcia. That
Yeah,
made a lot of sense.
yeah. The key is non-judgment and non-otherness, right? It's still the ability to connect with anyone, including those who are hurting us.
That is very interesting. Thank you. This is our last question for the morning. From TVC International, International Spiritist Council. What is the biggest obstacle for individualism?
Thank you. Thank you, TVC. This is a loaded question, right? Because what we're talking here is our world is pushing us, is forcing us to look at ourselves as a collective system. It is pushing just by the own history of the world today. We're moving toward becoming that collective organism, right? So the biggest obstacle for individualism is, I would say, the lack of awareness of what it is that makes my own lens be egocentric. It's that self-centered lens that only considers me as the source of truth. So the biggest obstacle for individualism is not to understand, and we can go into a large discussion here, but is not understanding how your ego, and I'm not saying remove your ego, but understand how your ego, your center of your consciousness, may be driving you in a world or a society that prizes and welcomes and rewards that trait, individualism, right? Therefore, your ego feeds into those traits that will make you successful in a material aspect. And so the greatest obstacle is lack of self-awareness, and a tool to combat it would be what we call inner transformation, right? It's that self-discovery, self-awareness. It is to be able to be brave enough to look at your shadow, your unconscious, what is everything that is inside of us. Again, the very becoming quite known in the world outside of religion or discussions like this, but the unconscious bias specifically, it's a McKinsey research that talks about I don't know how they measure, but 100,000 thoughts or decisions are made day by day. And only 5% of our decisions are conscious. So if our frame of mind is one of individualism, it's very, very easy that 95% of those 100,000 decisions that you have to make on a day-to-day basis will be of one that lacks compassion, that lacks love, that lacks a sense of being one with all of us. I hope this helped.
Actually, it was a very insightful answer. I appreciate it. Marcia, thank you so very much for this morning. It was quite interesting and I dare say quite enjoyable as well. Paul Craig says, thank you, Marcia. A wonderful teaching. It awoke a part of me that I didn't realize I had within me. Thank you, Paula. Marcia, I would like to invite you to make any final comments that you wish to share with us and also to say the final prayer. But before we get to that point, I would like to remind everybody who is listening, he's with us either live or on the recording, that next week our series of lectures continues. We're going to have Luis Lima, and he's going to be discussing hallucination or mediumship. So stay tuned again next week, Saturday, August the 7th at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Marcia, please say the final, say any final comments that you have, any final comments or final thoughts, and please say the final prayer for us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I just wanted to express my deep gratitude for this opportunity to be here, to learn, and to share about the power of compassion. And I would like to take this moment to thank and to say a very well-known prayer. So let us think about St. Francis' prayer, right? And I would say, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there's hatred, let me sow love. Where there's injury, pardon. Where there's doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it's in giving that we receive, and it's in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it's in dying that we're born to eternal life. So be it.
So be it. Everybody have a blessed weekend and a blessed week.